Hey, welcome to Talk Shit. I'm your host, Dave Wishnowski. Thank you and welcome to the very first of what I hope will be many episodes of the Talk Shit Show. Today, our very first guest is none other than the infamous People's Producer, Sanders Keel. He was a producer over at publisher THQ and was responsible for bringing many of the games to market that we love today. No Mercy, Revenge, WrestleMania 2000, a lot of the SmackDown games, Pride FC, so many more. I couldn't even list them all here quickly at all for you. But super happy, super grateful to have him here. He hasn't spoken about any of this stuff publicly for 20 years. A lot of us wrestling gamers, we have a lot of questions about what went down during WrestleMania X8 when THQ let Aki go, brought Yukes in, took over, and things spiraled down, some high points and low points, but eventually THQ folded, and Aki has since to ever make another wrestling game. Why was that? Well, Sanders coming on today. He's going to answer some questions for us. He has said he will come back and answer more questions because we just barely scraped the surface of a lot of this stuff. There's so much cool stuff we want to talk to him about. So, thanks again for coming. Thanks to Sanders for spending some time with us. Very classy dude. Like I say, he did not have to come on this podcast. He did not have to answer any questions. So, I can't thank him enough for being a cool guy, class act, and coming on here and doing this. So, without further ado, let's get to episode 1 of Talk Shit with Sanders Keel. All right, Sanders frickin' Keel, man. Welcome to the Talk Shit podcast. I can't begin to tell you, after listening to that introduction I put together, your list of credits and the goddamn battles you have fought in the gaming industry for wrestling is insane. There's no way we're covering everything in one podcast, in one interview, man. It's absolutely not. So first, thank you. I believe this might be one of the first video interviews, at least, that you've done since you left the wrestling game development scene.
Yeah, for sure. Done a few interviews for a couple of books, but nothing audio or video since then.
Well, thanks again so much. It means a lot to me. I know we got a lot of people following this that are just chomping at the bit to ask you stuff. There's so much cool shit that I want to talk to you about. But I think we kind of treat this like, when Bret Hart returns, all anybody wants to know about is the screw job, right? So let's talk about one of the biggest screw jobs ever, probably to wrestling gamers. In that era, in that time, there were probably only 2 or 3 things that completely crushed and made fandom feel betrayed. It was Metallica cutting their hair, George Lucas doing the prequels,
right,
and when THQ replaced Aki, when everybody was hoping for No Mercy 2 on the next generation, they, for whatever reason, let Aki go, and nobody to this day has any insight. Now, I know that, you weren't making all the decisions over there, even though your role as producer on those games. But what is it that you think people don't know about that they might have some misconceptions about what went down? Why would they replace such a proven, awesome developer on such a big franchise like that?
Yeah, well, it was more on the big business level, and it was just a lot of decisions that had nothing to do with the game itself. Had timelines, the fact that Aki didn't want to work on N64 or Nintendo anymore. They wanted to go on PlayStation. We had already committed to Yukes. And several factors. Upper management was changing over at THQ, and it was at Aki as well. And there just wasn't the same relationship that there had been. So I think there was a lot of factors, but it was all big business side.
What was your when you got the news that was happening? Did you anticipate that it was going to upset the apple cart, so to speak, or did you think that Oh, really? Because I would think that maybe everybody involved was relatively professional enough. Like Yukes is a good developer. THQ knows how to publish games. So what was was there a red flag or something that made you think this is a bad idea?
Oh, I mean, I absolutely lost my fucking mind right away. I mean, there was no reason to change anything the way we were going. N64 was good, and Yukes was on their path on PlayStation, and really it was kind of fixing something that wasn't broke at the time. And as a fan, I was really disappointed, and that's pretty much where I stood on the situation. I mean, all the work I did over there, yeah, it was a job, but I was a big fan as well. So
Yeah.
Sorry, turn my phone off. I never get calls, and now I'm getting calls.
That figures, right? So it was a corporate business decision to happen. You as a gamer and being, neck deep in the development of these wrestling games, knew that it might not work out well. So your position as producer, you had various responsibilities, obligations, working because
Right.
you were the producer at THQ, the publisher, right?
Yeah.
So maybe if you wouldn't mind just kind of letting people know like what your responsibilities and duties actually were, because so many people think everything is Sanders Keel's fault.
No, not really.
Yeah.
Not really. So, the thing with Aki is it was a pretty unique relationship. And it was done through the business guys, and they were allowed to do what they wanted to do pretty much as long as like we approved of it. And that, I guess that would be my role at the time. And I saw no reason to stop them from some of the stuff they were doing, except for, stuff that comes to like license issues. I was more of a babysitter with that, I'd say. I help with some of the concepts and designs on some of the stuff like Creative Wrestler. I had all my input. But it was making sure the game was done on time and on budget. And a lot of the cases with them, that wasn't the case. And I think that was always an issue with, upper management in business on our side. My take on that was, well, they're selling a ton and everyone likes it, and it just gets better, so let's let them put more in. Usually I wouldn't do that on a project, but in their case, it wasn't adding anything too crucial to the schedule, and nothing but making the game better. Like Creative Wrestler wasn't supposed to really go in at the time, and that was kind of pushed for extra, and we weren't sure, like we were pushing for a timeline, and kind of assured them this would be a really good decision, and glad we went with that because that turned out to be one of the biggest features.
Well, yeah.
At the time, I don't think there was really a big Creative Wrestler out there.
Well, I know the Acclaim games.
There was basic ones, yeah.
Yeah, not so much, right?
Yeah.
So that being a responsibility, then we all, at least gentlemen of a certain age, all remember that you were always marched out to speak on THQ's kind of behalf for the wrestling games, right?
Right.
So there was an infamous, I can't remember the interview or whatever, but I remember people holding on so much hope for the GameCube WrestleMania X8 game because the phrase that THQ had you use was to make sure to tell everyone that although it was Yukes, they had key members of the Aki team.
Yes.
So I totally understand the need to say something like that for marketing, right? But did you ever feel uncomfortable? I mean, I know that marketing and PR ethics are a gray area across the scale, right?
Right.
But how comfortable or uncomfortable did you feel once you might have had an inkling that WrestleMania X8 was going to be maybe a turd?
I didn't like it from the very first design meeting, and I knew it was going to not be good, and I didn't want to do any interviews about it. And I mean, you could tell even the wording. If you look at my other interviews, I'm pretty carefree with this. I was like a little extra careful because I was kind of being told to say what I was being told. I mean, it was a hardware issue from the beginning with
hardware. Really?
Yeah, the limitations. There wasn't a lot of memory. It was starting over. There was a lot of problems, and we were still being rushed to put the game out in the same time frame with no backbone, basically.
Well, maybe that's something, that sorry, all my best friends have decided to call me now.
Yeah, there you go.
God damn it. That's something that I think a lot of gamers to this day don't understand, how games are made with that relationship between the game developer and the publisher. A lot of people think the developer, if a game is bad or incomplete, the developer gets called lazy or they don't care or anything.
Right.
But maybe because you were on the front lines of that shit, maybe you can speak to how much or little power a developer has when it comes time to choosing the budget and the shipping date and that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, that definitely comes from the publisher in that regard. And they usually upper management business decides on the budget, or, head of product development, have a big say in that. And, we push for more, but the timeline was always a big thing because we were always expected to have it out for the holidays. I think that at that time it would have been more like a 2-year project than a year and a half if we put it out, because I don't think we wanted to put it out in springtime.
Yeah,
if I recall. But yeah, I did not like the design. Like, actually, it was a developer that came to us with a different scenario with a non-wrestling game where you solved puzzles and did all these kinds of things. And I just remember just not believing my ears, really. And and me and another producer from THQ just kind of looked at each other and just like, this is a disaster. So we didn't know what was going to become, and we pushed and pushed for, at least you have to make it a wrestling game. You can't just have these wrestlers solving puzzles, and it was very bizarre. It was like they would go through mazes and go through obstacles, and I don't know. It was very strange. It was very Japanese, but we got through that, and we decided on a plan, and it wasn't the greatest, but at the same time, they didn't. They couldn't really advance like they wanted to, So they didn't have 4 or 5 games behind them to put out something big.
Yeah, no kidding, eh? So WrestleMania X8 is released. Aki was taken off the games for, like you say, like business and financial reasons, right? They ended up going to EA and doing a couple of pretty cool games given their limitations, right? They had to make Def Jam Vendetta.
Yeah, it was a fun game.
It was totally insane as a concept, but it freaking worked, right? So it kind of breaks your heart a little bit to think what Aki could have done if given an actual wrestling license to continue on with, because that was like not bad at all, right? So here's the thing: you're fresh off of arguably some of the most successful wrestling games in history. I think even No Mercy might still be one of the top selling wrestling games of all time. I think
it could be. There might be more consoles out now, so
yeah.
Maybe sales wise, it's not the highest, but definitely at the time, and for a console that didn't have a lot out there compared to like a PS4 or something, it sold a lot.
So what's it like for you then, like personally? Like, I know that, back in the day, I was one of them, just totally calling you out by name and blaming you for WrestleMania X8 because, as a gamer, I thought I knew everything, right? So here you are, you're fresh off of doing like No Mercy, WrestleMania 2000, and as producer on those, like, could not have more stellar games on your resume. And then THQ makes these decisions that lead to WrestleMania X8 being the disappointment it was. And they pretty much push you out and go, okay, Sanders, you go take the heat for this. Good luck with that. Right. So what's it like, man? Did you feel like that was, part of the job expected? Did you feel any like personal betrayal at all? Or was it just came with the package?
Yeah, I was pretty upset, but that it comes with the job, Producers take the glory and they take the fall. And you don't we can't decide when each happens. Otherwise, we take all the glory all the time. But it's just part of the job. It's part of the nature of the industry to have changes that don't make any sense. I mean, you see it with everything, sports teams, whatever else. It's frustrating, and as a fan, very frustrating.
So you were probably one of the first, quote unquote, like celebrity game producers. I mean, the wrestling game community is pretty insane as it is, right? Like we get a little bit nerdy about our wrestling games, right?
Right.
So there you are. You've got this great games on your resume. You take the heat for WrestleMania X8. I think that was right around the time. Were you on the? I'm sorry, I should have been more prepared here. But were you credited for the Raw games on the original Xbox as well? Were you involved with those?
The first one, though, that's about the time I started falling off with THQ. My frustrations was around the time of X8 and the first Raw.
Yeah.
So what was and at the same time we had been starting on Pride, which was my baby. So I was falling out of love with the wrestling games at the time because of what was going on, and kind of like really pushing for Pride.
Well, that's something I wanted to talk to you about too. And like I say, there's not enough time in the world to get to everything, but just briefly, maybe explain to people. I don't think that you get enough credit for what you did to really push for the Pride game. Pride FC, which was, before that, I think there was only the UFC game on Dreamcast.
Right.
I mean, at that point, MMA was still kind of like an underground, stigmatized kind of thing. Like, you must have had some resistance bringing Pride to market.
Oh yeah, I originally pitched UFC way back. I'd say around the time of Revenge, maybe a little before that, actually. And they just all kind of laughed at me like it's never going to be big or anything in the sport. Well, it won't make a good game. And I'm like, I'll make a great game, even if the sport doesn't go anywhere. So to my dismay, I was denied that. And then maybe like 8 months later, there was a UFC game on Dreamcast that did fairly well. I mean, the sales were high. It was a fun game. It was the first attempt at something like that in the U.S., and it did well, and the UFC started taking off, and then it started getting popular. It became more mainstream, and I kind of give them I told you so. Well, here's Pride in Japan's going up. It's starting to show on pay-per-view in the U.S. A lot of the fighters like Gracie and Shamrock are going over there. They're well known. Let's get into this. And there was a lot of hesitation, but they're like, okay. And so I pitched and produced that game. And it was something that I was a really big fan. I watched UFC since the second one, and I was training way back in the day at the time. So to me, it was like something big and something I really enjoyed, and I thought it could be big someday. I mean, when I was first told that we were going to go ahead with it, I was just really excited. And then it was kind of a pain with the licensing because each fighter had to be licensed. And we got a certain amount with the Pride license, mainly the Japanese fighters, but we had to go out and get Hoist Gracie and Ken Shamrock and all those guys separate. And those two guys were a lot of money.
Do you remember ballpark what they were asking?
Oh, I don't remember. I know some of the lower fighters would pay maybe 8 to 10 grand, and I think they were maybe 100 plus.
Wow, you're kidding. Back in that day, that's crazy. I heard I knew somebody that worked at Acclaim during the Legends of Wrestling, and Acclaim, they're gone, and they're gone for a reason because I've heard some really shady stories about the way Acclaim did business. And you're talking about how much the Pride fighters got paid. I had heard from somebody who worked on Legends of Wrestling that when they were licensing the different wrestlers, Jake the Snake Roberts was at a pretty low point in his life, where he wasn't making the best decisions.
Right.
And they're saying that whoever was producing over at Acclaim took advantage and got Jake's license for $500.
Oh, God.
That's embarrassing. Isn't that sick?
That's embarrassing.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we we pay the top fighters a good amount, and then basically we had our set roster unless I could manage to get some fighters in for a lower price. And my favorite fighter at the time was Anthony Noe, and we were kind of online friends at the time through a forum. And I pitched it to him, and he was just excited about being in the game. A lot of the guys were, so got him a deal, and we became really good friends, and still to this day we're pretty good friends. And
so that
in
was
fact,
one of
after
the
THQ, after that went down, after I was let go from them, first thing he's like, "Oh, come out to Japan." So I went out and stayed at his house for like a week or two. That was pretty exciting. But,
that would be, man. So that was definitely one of the highs of your career, right?
Yeah.
You know, in games. Yeah. So let's rip the Band-Aid off and get this done. Sure. How did THQ handle, you know, throwing you under the bus and walking you to the front door?
Yeah. So actually, it wasn't just me. It was like a whole division.
That's right.
What happened was a few key guys in upper management, including my mentor, had left a few months before that. And I was kind of told, you know, what, be careful, you know, because they had these new guys coming in from like, I think it was Disney and EA, and just like really corporate kind of. I mean, we were corporate, but not like that. And they brought out in all their buddies to like replace a lot of us. And at the time, one of the things was to get rid of me, and I think another 4 producers were let go at the same time. Wow. So a lot of people that had been there a long time basically were replaced by whoever they brought in. So one by one, we were told what our role is going to be with the company, and I'm like, whatever. It's good or it's bad. Who cares? I don't. At the time, I was like getting kind of pissed at them. But you know, at the same time, I didn't think they would act the way they did. So they were interviewing us all, and basically they were like, well, you know, we don't think you bring anything. We don't see you here in the future. And this is a guy I met like once before was telling me this. And so it was like, yeah, they didn't even have anyone that was there, like old school to like let me go. So yeah, it was hideous, and I erupted in the meeting. I was pretty pissed. And this guy was
could you do a quick impression of Sanders on that day?
I don't think I can, man. I was heated. Yeah. My face must have been, you know, bright red. I was like, okay, whatever. And then they held these things like above like me getting like my money or whatever.
Your bonus, yeah.
Like they were gonna give me severance, and they're like, well, you got to go to these counseling classes. We think you have a temper and blah blah blah. And I'm like, wow, fuck? No one's ever told me this ever, right? And they did. They made me go this to get it because maybe they didn't think I was gonna go. I'm like, yeah, right. 3 months of pay, like I'm not leaving that at the door or whatever. But anyway, so we were done with the exit interview, and they had 2 big gorillas escort me out of the building. And I was like, my car keys are like upstairs, and they wouldn't even let me go in. They wouldn't let me say goodbye. And they wouldn't let me get any of my stuff. I had to come back like a couple weeks later, and they boxed everything for me.
Man, that is, I don't want
to. They included like all the stuff they owned with all these videos and all this stuff. I'm like, I got all this stuff that development stuff that wasn't mine. But yeah, man, it was really just angry. I heard my friend said during his exit, one of the guy was clipping his damn fingernails.
Oh,
so fuck. You know, I mean, yeah. There's some fun events that happen later that I'll get into later, but.
That's such a common, sadly, fucking story about the way game developers were handled. Maybe still are to this day, but
yeah,
getting that walk of shame, man. It's like they didn't trust anybody. Nobody got 2 weeks notice, and you know, getting walked to the front door and locked out and your keys taken was like common. They just treated people like fucking cattle. Here we are, the guy who fucking produced the best-selling wrestling games, arguably ever, best acclaimed wrestling games, brought Pride FC to the company and made them some, you know, money and made them some reputation. Yeah. And they're too fucking stupid to get it, you know? And then what happened to them? How long did they last until THQ folded like fucking shit.
Oh, right away they had a lot of problems. Not just my game, but in production throughout. They gained footing later, but then really didn't get it. The guy in charge of the game after me, Corey.
Corey
Well,
Ledesma, I think.
Corey was one guy. I like Corey a lot, and I
Good.
pushed for him to get out of QA, and that's how he joined production. And we were a good team and everything. He was a great guy, personal and business wise. They brought in this other guy. I don't know his name, but he came in to do like some of the budgeting and scheduling, and I think he left shortly after because I think he found out what a headache it is with the politics between the companies, the Japanese companies, and THQ. And eventually they went down. Bad decisions.
Yeah, and they didn't go down pretty, man. That was they circled the drain for a bit and literally just flushed.
Right.
All that, everything good, just out the freaking toilet, man. So that was that, man. And then you kind of left the wrestling game scene pretty much altogether, right? So the next time I heard from you blew me away because, again, people who are listening to this who don't know, I was very vocal online during the WrestleMania X8 days, calling Sanders Keel a lazy piece of shit and betraying the fucking community. And like I was a dick. I still feel bad about it to this day. But to show what kind of class you have, Pro Wrestling X, the game I'm working on producing, we did a Kickstarter a few years back. And lo and behold, we're doing this Kickstarter and we get a message from Sanders fucking Keel wishing us the best, good luck, and, all the power to you guys. And I know my crew and I were just blown away going, we are assholes. This guy showed so much class by showing up and wishing us nothing but the best and good luck. So how the hell did you even hear about Pro Wrestling X and even be bothered to take the time to comment on a Kickstarter?
Well, I mean, I heard through the grapevine, just like any other wrestling fan or, gamer. And, I often look at Kickstarter as well for projects, see what was going on. And I can't remember how I came across it. I think it was by your, I think I read it on a forum maybe even. And, I saw it and I was like, oh, this is great. It's great. You're making an attempt to create the game that you want to make. And, I was like, well, this could be hard, but best of luck to him, and we'll see how it goes.
This is going to be hard, man. I remember back in the day, Gaming Ring was a popular website, and Mike Regan, I'm not sure, was running the website. And you and him were in touch, and you helped his website get some content to promote the WWE games and stuff when you were working on them. And Mike told me when I was first starting Pro Wrestling X, like before I had even made a prototype or anything, just a loud, angry fan saying, I'm making a wrestling game. Mike said that he asked you, Sanders, do you have any advice for Dave? He wants to get into the game industry and make a wrestling game. And Mike said, your answer was, tell Dave just to grab a beer, put his arm around his woman, and just have fun playing someone else's game rather than trying to make your own. So I'm guessing he might have caught you at a bitter point in your life.
He probably caught me towards the end of THQ, and I was fed up a little bit there for a while. And the difficulties that were surrounding the games. I mean, it's always been like that, but just trying to envision someone trying to just start a game company at that time. There wasn't a lot of little startups. The game industry was a little bit more underground than it is now.
Oh, so for sure.
It wasn't a common thing. Now developers create whatever they want. Anyone can.
And yet, still, ironically, you would think that with the proliferation of easy access to game engines and tutorials and all this stuff, that there would be like 20 times more independent wrestling games than there are these days, right? There's still, you can count them on one hand, still so many try and get barely to the prototype phase and give up. In your opinion, why do you think there aren't more indie wrestling games? Do you think, from your experience, the games really are that hard to make and people underestimate it, or you just think not
Yeah,
popular enough genre, or what do you think?
yeah. I think they're difficult to make, but I also think they're time consuming. Um,
Yeah, a
as
little
far
bit.
as getting them correct with the physics and everything,
Yeah.
we tried to make one at a Game Loft, and it was this French mobile company, and
Mm.
they asked me, they're like, "Oh, you worked on wrestling?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." I was just kind of like, I didn't know if I wanted to get in this, and then we started developing, and then um, programmers are having a hard time, but of course on mobile, it was even harder.
Yeah.
Um, and then we were gonna go for a Fire Pro kind of view as far as the ring and everything.
Mm.
So we tried, kind of the classic layout, and they were having a hard time with that on mobile at the time.
Yeah.
This was before iPhone. This was like Java
Jesus.
Brew, yeah. So this is
Yeah,
like
man.
on higher end mobile phones. And then we had this interview with the head of sports designer from GameLoft from France, and he was trying to tell me how to make a wrestling game and this and that, and I just shut him down. And he's like, "Oh, what do you know about this?" And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me!" And I blew up, and I was like, "I want off this game." And so it got shipped somewhere else where they got Hulk Hogan's license, and they made some disastrous drama game, including stuff about his like drama that was going on at the time in his personal life
Oh
and all
my
this stuff.
God.
And it was embarrassing. And I don't know if my name's on that, but I hope not, because it had nothing to do with that. I don't even think they used our engine, so I think they started over. But I think it was
Yeah.
made in China, and you could tell by the text.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
yeah,
Everybody thinks it's easy to make games, man. I learned the hard way. It is not easy to make a wrestling game. I had a producer advise me when I first started. He said, make any game but a wrestling game. He said they are the most intricate, hardest freaking games to get right. And I mean, that's been proven. EA had all the money in the world. They mayhem and backstage assault kind of sucked. And look what
yeah.
happened
I
to
enjoyed
2K.
every second of that one. I enjoyed every second of that one because they kind of at the time sniped WCW from us, and
Yeah.
I was really pissed. And it turned out to be a blessing for us because at the same time we got WWE, and at that time the momentum in the Monday Night Wars kind of switched, so it
Hmm.
really hit us in a good way, and we kept Aki, and their game didn't turn out so well, and
Oh.
uh, yeah, I was pretty happy about that. I played it for like maybe 15 minutes and threw it in the garbage, and I was pretty happy. I was like, I'm done with this.
I think you
I
played it
can
longer
I
than
can
I
I
did.
can relax now. I was kind of nervous, at first
Right?
because I
I
love
remember
EA and
seeing
I
the
love all their sports games, but it just was not meant for them to develop.
I remember seeing the press while they were developing it, and they had Goldberg there doing motion capture and everything. And you would think with their massive resources that they would pull it off. But it just goes to show a wrestling game can't be made by throwing money at it. And we're going to have a talk in another interview about the whole AEW situation, saying they're going to get Aki back. And I'd love to hear you talk about that, but we could go for another hour
Mm,
there. But I mean, even look at the latest, the 2K WWE game. They switched teams. All they did was switch teams. They had the same code base, they had documentation, everything,
yeah,
and that was a debacle that made WrestleMania X8 look like Fire Pro Wrestling, man. Like it was
yeah. I
crazy.
I haven't even played it, and I'm not even sure what the situation is with the development teams. I
Yeah.
really don't know. I haven't played the last. I think the last one I played was maybe like 2015 or 16. I just stopped playing them
I
altogether.
hear you, man. It's funny, the more you make games, the less you play other people's. It's kind of weird.
Yeah,
You would
it's
think the
true.
opposite. Well, hey man, I don't want to keep you forever. We got so much more to talk about. Like I'm looking at your resume in front of me, and we haven't even touched on, you worked on WCW versus the World. You worked on, obviously, World Tour, the Aki Games. I'd love to hear your stories about Nitro and Thunder.
Yeah, I got some
Right?
stories.
You're
Yeah,
obviously like Revenge. My first exposure to the Aki Games was
yeah,
crazy. WrestleMania 2000. You were a producer on SmackDown 1, 2. Just bring it. That's crazy. Royal Rumble on the DC. My God, I want to talk about that one all day.
right.
Um, And of course, the ugly stepchild of the bunch, WWF Betrayal for the Game Boy Color, man.
Oh
That
yeah.
that needs its own Netflix documentary, I think, that game, man. I'd love to hear how that went. So, just wrapping it up for this one, you will be back to talk more wrestling games. Can't thank you enough. But a segment we'd like to do here on the podcast, just starting in honor of Metallica. Instead of saying thank you to everybody, well, they said thank you to everybody on their albums. They also included a fuck you list, where they called out certain people that they were just like, fuck you for not helping us. Fuck you for, trying to hold us back. Is there anybody in Sanders Keel's, memory that he would like to take this opportunity to say, fuck you to directly or indirectly?
Well, the guy that let me go and took over head of production in THQ was pretty awful. So I'll just.
I hope he's.
His name was Philip. I don't even remember his last name. It was some dipshit.
Some dipshit named Philip.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Fuck you, Philip.
Yeah.
Good to know, man. Let's get a middle finger for Philip. Fuck you, Philip. Yeah. Okay. Now, usually at the end of the podcast, the interviewer just thanks you and we go on our way, right? But instead of doing that, I want to do something for you. Whenever somebody asks me how I'm doing, I usually say I'm doing awesome or 10 kinds of awesome. So Sanders Keel, I want to give you my list of awesome things that I want to thank Sanders Keel for. All right. So I'm going to embarrass you. I hope I make you cry. That'd be great. All right. Get your tissues ready. All right. Now, people probably don't know, but you and I have been kind of in contact for the last few years. And one of the cool things you did was I got a late night phone call once at 2:00 in the morning about a year ago when I was kind of down about Pro Wrestling X kind of being installed. And you called me up. I don't know if you remember. You might have had a beer or 12. And
that sounds about right. It's probably at the brewery late night. Ghost Town Brewery. It's awesome.
Ghost Town, yeah. You spent about like a half an hour on the phone with me in the middle of the night, just saying, keep the faith, keep going. What you guys are doing with Pro Wrestling X could be really, really cool. Don't give up. Your team is awesome. Your ideas are awesome. And that meant so fucking much to me. I could barely fall asleep after we hung up because I was like, God damn, man. Sanders went out of his way to encourage a small little team. You didn't have to do that. So thank you for that, Sanders. Also, I really want to thank you for the way you treated the wrestling game community back in the days. I don't think any other game developer actually added, the names of people like Mike Reagan at Gaming Ring. He's got his name in the credits for No Mercy. That does not suck. And you did not have to do that. Thank you for being cool to the community, right? Also, of course, I've already kind of alluded to this before, but thank you for being a class act when I totally treated you like shit publicly. So from me to you publicly, one more time, thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you for forgiving me. And thank you for being a cool dude, man. You set the bar there. That was really cool. Also, we talked about earlier, thank you for everything you did to help, raise awareness for MMA and what you did for the Pride game. Like you said, nobody wanted you to make the fucking Pride game.
Right.
And I think the success of that game definitely helped greenlight projects after that for other developers and that, right? So I think you're kind of like, the unsung kind of secret history weirdo of MMA video games. You're known so much for the wrestling shit that you don't get enough credit for what you did for MMA. So MMA fans, they owe you hard for that, right? Also, now that I am a game developer, publisher kind of guy, I know exactly what it's like to have your mistakes and whatnot raked over the coals on the internet and called names like, worse than Hitler and all that kind of fun stuff. So,
wow.
Oh, yeah.
That's setting a bar right there.
Right. I don't think people know what Hitler did necessarily when they compare me to him, Yeah. So, watching the way you handled shit when you had to get out there and be the face of some of the worst game decisions that THQ made with X8 and whatnot. Thank you for showing the rest of us how to fucking man up and do the job you were paid to do, right? And take the heat for shit, So that was cool. Also, the very last thing I want to thank you for is a really big deal to me and the crew and everybody else. I've talked you up a lot before, looking at your resume. Not only were you on the front lines for some of the best developed games, the No Mercy, Revenge, and all that stuff. That's a wealth of fucking knowledge that anybody would be lucky to have access to. But I think, arguably more importantly, you were there front and center for some of the worst decisions a publisher ever made in the way they deal with developers and all that. And and in my opinion, having someone who's seen things go wrong and can help you avoid, other people's mistakes,
right,
is worth its weight in gold. So the last thing I want to thank you for, I am so fucking honored I get to say this. I want to thank you, Sanders Keel, for being the first official member of the Pro Wrestling X Advisory Board. You are the first person to actually join this crew in probably fucking 10 years, I think.
awesome.
It's a high bar, man. You have to be a wrestling nerd, a wrestling game fanatic. You got to have succeeded at what you do and also face some failure and keep fucking coming and keep going.
Yeah.
And, without blowing too much smoke up your ass, we are so happy that a while back you offered to be the first official member of the Pro Wrestling X Advisory Board. So I'm announcing that officially today. Sanders Keel, Pro Wrestling X. Thank you very much, sir.
Right.
So this is where you get to say nice things about us. You have said some wonderful things about Pro Wrestling X, and our love for the Aki kind of sense of fun and those game mechanics. And you gave us some wonderful language and quotes to use about, Pro Wrestling X being, continuing on that legacy of the Aki games. Maybe without being too nice. What is it about, if you just let me fish for compliments here, what is it about Pro Wrestling X that gives you faith or hope that we're going to continue to go down the right path and pull this shit off when we've been through so much hardship? Or maybe that's why. I'm not sure.
Right. Well, I definitely think, you guys have tried different things out. Some have worked, some have failed, but you keep going and it continues to improve. The attention to detail has been really awesome. So I'm seeing that. I know you guys are working hard, and I know what it takes to pump out just even animations and how long it takes, not just with the look, but on the programming side. Very difficult to do. And I know that will continue. And I look forward to the game just getting better and better.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks for helping us get it there, man. I know being able to call you up and say shit like, hey, Sanders, we're thinking of signing a deal with this company. What do you think? It's been a lifesaver for you to be able to go, don't fucking do it, buddy. You'll regret it for the rest of your life, right? And you've been right. So thanks again. I'm looking forward to this. I hope we can continue to do regular interviews, podcasts, just talking shit and wasting your time. That'd be fantastic. Sure. I know people want to know what you're working on now, where you're going. We want to talk about all of these other games you worked on and your love of wrestling and being in Japan. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I want to hear more about working at a brewery too. That's like my next dream job, man. So I'll let you go, man. I know you've got a lot of shit to do today. And I can only say thank you so many times before I start sounding repetitive and sad. So
thanks for having me on, and we'll do it again soon.
I'm sure that once this goes live, we're going to get lit up with like 10 million questions. Like we got to do an episode just on WrestleMania X8. Our lead artist, Mr. Wrestling 5, I sent it to you. He gave us about 2 pages of questions just about the development of that game. So
right,
you're going to need some beers for the next few interviews, man.
We'll do. Yeah, it's a little early for that, but it's getting there. Awesome. Yeah, it's about lunchtime.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Sanders. I'm going to hang up and go edit the sucker and get it online as soon as possible. Thanks a lot, man.
Awesome, Dave. See you.
Cheers.
Damn, that was fun. That was cool, man. I can't wait to have Sanders on. There's so much more I want to talk about. I want to hear about all his time in Japan, when he spent in the offices working directly, with the Aki team, the Yukes team, other games he's worked on with developers like Anchor. Really, really want to pick his brain and learn more about all the questions that we've always had for all these years. So Thanks again, everyone, for stopping by. If you are interested in learning more about the project I'm producing, Pro Wrestling X, we're all over social media. It's hard not to find us. It's pretty much Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, anything /Pro Wrestling X. Also, just open a Patreon. I think there's some links kicking around here below in the description where we are sharing private, internal, development-only builds of the game. So if you ever wanted to check out what it's like, a wrestling game in progress, check out the Patreon. We're only accepting $1, so not a bad deal, right? So thanks again, y'all. We'll see you next time. We got more guests lined up. Going to do some cool shit on Talk Shit. Thanks again. Cheers.